Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today I just wanted to come with a quick video showing people how I edit my photos that I take of my paintings for the internet or whatever other uses you may need. So just want to get started with the captured image from the camera. If you're using a cell phone or a digital camera, the process is similar. I'll go over the differences as we go through. This is a digital camera with a RAW format photograph. So the digital images from the cell phone won't have this section over here for highlights and shadows. It'll be more of a abbreviated, kind of simplified section for the JPEGs. I'm shooting in RAW off a Sony camera. But let's go ahead and get started with the first section. So once you get your camera, you import it. If you have Lightroom, come to the library, hit import. Of course, you find your images on your camera, on your card. And then on this side, you select where you want them to land. So I usually add it to a collection of abstract artworks or figurative artworks, whatever you're doing. By the way, you can copy, move. I like to move them off my card. You can copy if you want and keep it back up on the card. Then you need to find where you're going to be saving at. So I save mine on my drive and in your respective folder. As far as wherever your file organization works, I save mine in a folder and in the subfolder. You can set it up however you want. And then once the import's done, I've already imported mine, so you just hit import. Once the import's done, you hop over to the develop section. If you never used Lightroom before, it's a good tool, very good tool for editing photos and kind of batch editing processes. Let's see. So you have your white selection tool. It's this kind of color picker looking thing. This is where you kind of want to start at. Right now it's as shot. So I first select that and then select a neutral color, usually a white, because white is reflecting light that's in the room, right? So I could use this background here, and it gives us a pretty accurate representation of a neutral. And this is basically the way it should look, kind of in a perfect setting. So you can select any neutral color, and as long as it's pretty close to what it actually looks like, then you should be good. If you're in these whites, all these are going to be neutrals. So either a mid gray or like a lighter color. A white will work. If you select like a blue, you'll see that it'll shift everything over to the yellow to balance it out. It's kind of auto balancing it. So you want to go back to a neutral. If you want to zoom in, so something like that. And that's pretty much exactly what it looks like. Gold, white, blue, teals. All right, so the second thing I do is to kind of make this straight. You can do your best when shooting, but it's always going to be a little off. So you come over here to the transform section and you select this manual tool. And we're going to pick select the edges and draw this line across the edge. So that pretty much perfectly lines it up with the edges. And what it'll do, once you do this, it will transform it into a perfect square pretty much, or a perfect line. You do this, the horizontal or vertical first, and then you come to the other side and do both sides. and that's a square. So then after that, I'm gonna go to crop, get the ratio of 1:1 so that it turns itself into a square, and line it up. On the canvas, you can kind of cut off some of those edges that are kind of rolling over the side. You don't really need those, you just need it perfectly squared up. We'll see what that looks like. All right, there we go. When you zoom in, you can kind of see a little bit of that edge. Also the lighting when you shoot it. Go to this one for a second. See the sun's over here, so it's naturally lighter over here and darker on this side. You kind of want to avoid that or use fill flash. I filled it in, so I shouldn't have too much of that, but if you can use a graduated filter and run it this way so that or this way so that the brightness starts here and ends and drops off here. I'll show you how to do that if you have that issue. I think it is a little brighter on this side. Let's see. All right. I think we'll be all right with that. Next, I go to the exposure section and bump it up no more than 0.5 to 7.5. All right. So once I've got the exposure in a decent range, you don't want it too white and washed out, obviously, and you don't need to take it down and make it less if you shot it properly. Which we can talk about shooting. That's kind of a different video, but for now we'll just leave it there. Contrast is to preference, really. If you want it to look harder and kind of more contrasty, I guess, you can raise it up. If you like it to look flatter, it depends on the piece, really. For me, this one I think I will add maybe 10 to 15. A bit again about that graduated filter. This is the graduated filter section. I already have it up, exposure bump of 0.44, so let's see. And you can see it came in on that left side and it'll drop off on that right side, and that'll balance it out completely. Even though I did use the fill flash, I could probably take it down to 0.25, but that actually looks decent. Let's stick with that, and then actually looks pretty good around 0.5, 0.4, 0.5. Also, your surroundings and your monitor really make a difference when you're doing this type of stuff. So monitor calibration and your being in a moderately dim room, not too much bright sunlight hitting the screen. Stay with the 0.5. Now for these, you can hold Alt, and as a general rule of thumb, I don't like to go past 30 on any of this stuff. Sometimes it doesn't need it. It'd be better if I was demonstrating this on a photo. These are kind of more for like photography with people and stuff in them. But you see, normally where that turns black, you want to go right above that or below that. So you don't want it to dip into the blacks, because that's actually clipping. This is the histogram here, shows you the darks over here and the whites over here. So you don't want it to clip to where it actually goes into like just pure blackness. but that is adding way too much black. So like I said, as a general rule of thumb, don't go past 30. If it's not making a huge difference, I'll set it around 15. And it does affect the picture, but again, you don't want it clipping or washed out. So I'll add a little bit to it. For shadows and highlights, you want to actually go until you see some and leave it there. But again, it's way past 30. So I'll just leave it about there. And if you want to check, come to the before and after. This is the before, this is the after. So I could even reset those highlights and shadows and see how that looks, because that's almost looking too hard. It's another form of adding contrast, really. And with that contrast bump, it makes it look almost too hard. You can always change this and mess with this. I may just leave it as is. So let's stay there. These down here are kind of more seldomly used, but they do have some cool effects on certain pieces if you really want to play with it to make it look extra contrasty. If you zoom in, you can see the texture of the canvas, and that's normal. With a bump up, it'll exacerbate that, kind of make it look even more texturish, and you take it down, it'll look blurry. So skin, stuff like that. Clarity has a cool effect as well. Really gives it like a soft look, but obviously you don't want that in a piece that has texture. Dehaze uses it, kind of gives it that washed out look if it actually does have haze on it, or you can add that for a cool haze effect. Double click and get back to 0. For vibrance, you really got to be careful with these. Go about 5. Start off about 5 and 5 or 5 and 10, somewhere around there. 10 can sometimes be too much on the saturation. And for tone curve, it's always nice to add a little bit of an S curve sometimes. Very subtle. It pulls the darks down, and about right here pulls the highlights up to add some nice contrast. Then you can turn this on and off to see the difference. That's a very subtle difference, but again, it is kind of making a nice difference here with the deep blues and the brighter colors. So I think I may leave that on. I just don't want it to look too artificial and more natural. So a lot of times I'll do it to see and then turn it back off. Oh yeah, this is also one of the first things you want to do, but mine's already set up. The camera it starts to remember what it is, or it automatically does it on some. So you set the lens that you used and remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. So what those do is, chromatic aberration is color distortion kind of in the lens, and profile corrections from the lens itself. So you can turn this off and see. It's really not making much of a difference this time, but a lot of times you'll see the fisheye kind of bulge a little bit, and it'll correct that, which is nice. All right. I guess the Sonys don't have much to begin with. And for effects, I don't really mess with this. But that's pretty much what it is. And that's pretty much it as far as the corrections. Again, here's the before and after. So again, with these, you're not really trying to edit them too much. You're trying to give an accurate representation of what it looks like, and good lighting, perfect lighting, really, underneath natural light of the sun, or in a studio environment with lights shining on it. Pretty much this is how it's going to look, and you want to be pretty much truthful with these pieces, because you don't want someone to see it and be like, hey, that's not the piece that I saw. That's not what it looked like. So there's a lot of other tips and tricks and techniques that you can use, but for this, I like to keep it pretty vanilla, pretty simple. And as far as the next thing you do is just pretty much export. So there's a couple different ways to do this. You can export this JPEG as is, as a JPEG or a PNG. With Lightroom, I install JPEG Mini, so it takes down the size of the JPEG. This is the simplest way, pretty much. Let's see. Put it into a subfolder called JPEG. You can change the format here to a PSD, TIFF, DNG, original, color space, sRGB. And this will output you a file size about 1 point something megabytes, which is nice. Another way I like to do it, kind of more of like an archival way, is you can either export as a TIFF and then open it up in Photoshop, or a PSD, and then go from there. What I like to do is just control click or command click and edit in Photoshop. That way it'll bring up Photoshop, and you can export it from there. Also make any other corrections you need to. If you need to do some other type of editing or clean up a spot that got messed up or anything, you can do it in one step. All right, now we got it in Photoshop. Always double click this layer and open up this lock layer. All right, now it also gives me a better look at it because I don't know, I'm just seeing it on gray, how I'm used to looking at it. All right, looking good. We can see details, or if you ever make a print of this. All right, and what I like to do is file, export as. And what you want to do is make a 1x. I like it in JPEG, but what you can do is you'll save this file as well as a TIFF. Once you hit Command S, it'll actually save it. We'll go through that in a second. So a 1x and then a 0.25x. A 0.25 is going to be for the web. You can put web _web. And the 1x is of course the original. We hit export all. Those moire lines are there, but they're not gonna. It's not gonna appear there. And then export that baby. 13.1 for the original. That's pretty big. But if you're putting it on a print, you want it big. The 0.25 is going to be for everywhere else. Yeah, 13.8, that's bigger than normal actually, and this honestly looks a little bit dark, but again, it is an accurate representation of the piece, so I'm gonna leave it alone. Oh, one good thing I did forget to do, let's check. Let's see if the levels are on point, because this really changes the, yeah, okay, see that? And that could be because I, changed the contrast and whatnot, but honestly, if these are off, it doesn't look right sometimes. And this is, of course, when I'm doing this video, creating a kind of a unique scenario where it's way off. Maybe I was too far under or a little overexposed. And that's why it's good to keep the piece close as well for reference. Yeah, probably was a little underexposed, so I'll take this level correction. That's why I love Photoshop. Kind of the final pass. The Big Brother software, let it do its thing. Check first. These are almost black. These are deep, kind of indigos. But it's not clipping. Maybe I'll just move it back so it's not. All right. This is the main information here, so yeah, that'll be good. And let's see. Yeah, it definitely was a little under. Now there's much more variation, much more richness of color and depth to the piece. Even the whites are coming through better. So yeah, that's why I love Photoshop. So I'll do that again and let it overwrite those two files. Even though it may not overwrite them. It may just create some unique files and then I'll just delete them, the old ones. And see, that top is kind of has a little bit of rollover on it. But it's fairly accurate of how the piece looks, so I'm going to leave it. And that's pretty much it. So that's how to edit your photos that you take on your camera in Photoshop and Lightroom for art purposes. If you've been following my work, I'm on Instagram at Made by Malik, so check me out, and I'll be coming with some more informational tutorials and maybe some other things. Let me know what kind of content you want to see, and thanks for watching. Peace.